Welcome to this circle where we gather on the traditional lands of the Cree people, Treaty 6 people, in particular the Papas-Chase Nation, where we come together with one another and create spiritual community, where we come with our hungers and our thirsts, our longings, our hopes and our fears, where we create together a community that leans into one another, looking for the sacredness between us, within us, among us and beyond us. And we come always waiting for technology to work, waiting for latecomers to take their place, waiting for more light. We wait for water to boil, for a rose to open, for a child to be born, for war to end, for some things to make sense. We wait for the stock market to rise, for sobriety to come, for a cure, for pain to subside, for the ambulance to come. We wait for the world to be safer, for poverty to be a thing of the past, for grief to feel lighter. We wait for light to return. And so it does. Each day, without fail.
And so in our meeting and in our coming together, we wait with intention. We wait with hope and anticipation. We wait with words that we might share together as we pray. We gather in the radiance. I want to invite anyone to come forward for our time for all ages. We usually come to the carpet, but we're going to come to the table today. Come on. We can still come. We just are going to stand around the table, okay? Here we are. There's lots of room. Where are you going to go, Liam? Right there? Perfect. Oh, okay. So today, during our time up here, I thought we'd talk about waiting for Christmas. It's December. How many of us in this room have Advent calendars? Lots of people? Some people? Good. Advent calendars. You get every day. Lego. Gum. Nice. Okay. Liam? Chocolates. Mm-hmm.
I gotta count all the way to the farthest number until Christmas.
I know. It's a long count. Mm-hmm.
I have an advent calendar on my computer.
Oh, neat. On your computer.
Can we play games?
Mm-hmm. You can play a game every day? That's neat. That's fun. Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day.
Right. I like that. That's a neat idea. We have when we come to church, there's a different way of counting. We're not all here every day, so we can't count every day, but we can count the Sundays. And we have 4 blue candles to help us do that in this season before Christmas, and that season is called Advent, and that's why these are called Advent candles, and you have Advent calendars for this season before Christmas called Advent. And today, I would like us to, there's 3 small people around the table, so I'm wondering maybe we can let them help light the candles. Now, last Sunday was our first Sunday in Advent. Can the 3 of you circle around this candle? Just come this way a little bit. And last week, we talked about that we wait for Christmas in simple ways, and we notice simple things, and we try to live simply. So let's all take this candle. We can all do it together, okay? It'll be okay. Liam, do you want to help? Okay, put your hand up there. Okay, we're going to light this first. You did it.
Good job.
And then come over here, and I'll tip it.
Yeah, good. Right in there. It's a hard one. Gotta hold it still.
You gotta hold it for a while.
Because it's teeny, so we gotta really hold it. Good job. It's going.
You did it. Perfect. So our no, let's stay. Let's keep it. This is our candle of simplicity. And then today, it's the second Sunday of Advent, so we get to light another candle. And this is going to be our candle of waiting or expectation. We are really excited for Christmas, so we're waiting. You did it. Okay, on the count of 3, let's all blow this one out, okay? 1, 2, 3. Good work.
What a wind.
You did it. And I'll take that. Perfect. We did it. And now, can you tell me, we've had 2 Sundays in Advent, how many more Sundays to go? How many more blue candles?
2.
There's 2 more. So now we know there's 2 more Sundays before Christmas. And then once all 4 are lit, we know that Christmas is pretty soon. It's right after that 4th candle gets lit, so we're excited about that. So thank you for helping to light these candles. We can do it again next time, and we get to light 3 next week. It's lovely. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Right now, I want to invite us to Kids Spirit or to Youth Cafe downstairs. Let's do it.
There are two first-century collections of stories that give us the stories we celebrate in this season. Matthew's Gospel, written sometime in the 70s or 80s of the first century, and Luke's Gospel, written most likely in the 80s of the first century. In Luke's Gospel, he begins by telling us the story of the birth of a cousin of Jesus of Nazareth, then tells us a story of the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, and then in the third chapter tells us about the coming of age for both John and Jesus. This is the story from the third chapter of Luke. It was in the 15th year of the rule of the Emperor Tiberius, when Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea. Herod was ruler of Galilee. His brother Philip was the ruler of Iturea and Trachonitis. And Lysanias was the ruler of Abilene. It was during the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas, when an inspired word came from John, the son of Elizabeth and Zachariah, and the word was spoken in the wilderness. And John went about the region around the Jordan, calling for a change of heart, reminiscent of what the prophet Isaiah had said. The voice of someone crying in the wilderness, "Make ready a way for God, make a straight path, where every valley will be filled and every mountain and hill leveled, where what is crooked will be made straight, and the rough ways smooth, and the whole human race will see wholeness." The crowds would ask John, "So what should we do?" And he would answer them, "Whoever has 2 shirts should share with the one who has none. Whoever has food should do the same." Tax collectors also came and would ask him, "Teacher, what should we do?" And he said to them, "Charge no more than the official rates." And soldiers also asked him, "What about us?" And he said to them, "No more shakedowns, no more frame-ups either. Be satisfied with the pay you receive." And the people were filled with expectation. And everyone was trying to figure out whether John might be the Messiah, the long-awaited one. This is a story passed down to us from the first century Jesus tradition. A reading from Ruben Alves. Ruben is a Brazilian theologian who died just over a year ago. This is his wisdom. What is hope? It is the presentiment that imagination is more real and reality is less real than it looks. It's the hunch that the overwhelming brutality of facts that oppress and repress us is not the last word. It is the suspicion that reality is more complex than the realists want us to believe. That the frontiers of the possible are not determined by the limits of the actual. And in a miraculous and unexplained way, life is opening up creative events which will open the way to freedom and resurrection. But the two, suffering and hope, must live from each other. Suffering without hope produces resentment and despair. But hope without suffering creates illusions, naivety, drunkenness. So let us plant dates. Even though we who plant them will never eat them. We must live by the love of what we will never see. This is the secret discipline. It is the refusal to let our creative act be dissolved by our need for immediate sense experience. And it's the struggled commitment to the future of our grandchildren. Such disciplined hope is what has given prophets, revolutionaries, and saints the courage to die for the future they envision. They make their own bodies the seed of their highest hopes. These are the words of a Brazilian liberation theologian. I don't know if there's any season more weighted with expectations than Christmas. We expect families to gather and set aside their differences in deference to the Christmas spirit. We expect the world to be kinder and gentler, at least for the holidays. We expect to engage our well-rehearsed traditions. We expect a surge in generosity. In fact, every charity, every church depends on a Christmas miracle of exceptional giving. We expect to reach out to the most vulnerable members of our society with special holiday meals and gifts. We expect to enjoy good food and great music. We expect to fill our calendars with concerts and Christmas parties and time with friends and family. And our culture tells us that we're expected to be happy, even joyful. After all, it's the season of Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. We don't wish anybody a mediocre Christmas or a so-so holiday. It's the time of superlative expectations for the merriest of Christmases and the happiest of holidays. And on the other side of that season, we've often known the January blues and the January blahs when that tide of expectations has gone out. And we feel a little let down when all is over again for another year. The first century stories that give us and shape this season for us are also laden with expectations. From the storied world of Roman-occupied Palestine, the ancient storytellers are preoccupied with the birth of two children. One, the utterly unexpected and scandalous child of a young, unmarried woman named Mary, who's barely more than a child herself. And the other, the child of her much older cousin Elizabeth, who has longed to become a parent over many barren years of marriage. And along with her husband Zachariah, they have all but given up the expectation of ever bringing a child into the world. The characters in these stories have much to teach us about our human expectations. Could these characters ever have imagined their children would still be spoken of some 2,000 years later? In the world of the story, Zachariah is going about his priestly business, expecting business as usual. And while he's caught up in a cloud of incense, he's startled by a vision of a stranger standing to the right side of the altar. And the stranger's first words to Zachariah are the words that our sacred texts speak so often and speaks to every character in the stories that shape this season for us. To Zachariah and Elizabeth, to Mary and to Joseph, to shepherds. Those words, do not be afraid. How could one not be afraid to bring a child into the world at such a time as this? Of course, you will feel fear. But it's be not afraid. Do not be fear. Do not become fear. Do not live from a place of fear. You will soon to be a father, and you will name your son John. He'll be a spirited person. And like the ancient prophet Elijah, he'll challenge the powers that oppress and the status quo that serves the privilege. And like the best of the prophets, he'll attract the attention and anger of the authorities as he calls his people to a greater faithfulness and a new spiritual awakening. So as the story goes, Elizabeth did conceive that unexpected child, and Zachariah remained speechless from the moment of his vision until days after the birth of the child, when the mother defied convention and names the child herself. His unexpected, conventionally defying name is the first word that Zachariah is able to speak in more than 9 months. Confounding the social norm to name the firstborn after his father or grandfather or some revered ancestor, Zachariah supports his liberated wife and confirms indeed that the child's name will be John, just like she said. And true to form, he needed a unique name because he truly was his own man. He rejected the traditional practices of his religion, and he became a voice of reform. He rejected the economic and political norms of the empire, and he became a voice for social reform. And like his better-known cousin, Jesus of Nazareth, John too was able to imagine an alternative to the dominant culture of inequity and oppression. He was able to resist the program of the empire that had persuaded the masses that the way things are is the way things must be. Luke introduces us to that grown-up John by listing the 5 most influential leaders of his time, the veritable who's who list of first century Palestine. John comes of age when Tiberius was emperor, Pilate was governor, Herod, Philip, and Lysanias were the puppet kings, and an unexpected word was spoken. But that word didn't come from the politicians. Into the time when Annas and Caiaphas were high priests of the temple, a new vision was emerging, a vision no one expected to see, but that new vision didn't come from the religious leaders of the day. The New Deal didn't come from the palace or the temple. These new ideas emerged in the Judean wilderness with John and along the shores of the Galilee with Jesus. And the ones who offered this new vision were the most unlikely of candidates. Luke's audience was well acquainted with Caesar's peace plan. Rome's program for peace was peace through military victory, peace by war. Caesar Augustus was acclaimed as Prince of Peace, Son of the Most High God, Lord and Savior. Titles we all recognize that we thought were unique to Jesus of Nazareth, but they were in fact titles given to Caesar because he succeeded in uniting the Roman Empire after years of civil war. Titles that only later came to be used of Jesus to signal that his vision was antithetical to Caesar's. John's audience in the wilderness and Luke's audience some 50 years later were so familiar with the occupier's peace plan. They knew how the Romans leveled hills and filled in valleys to build an all-weather road to Rome, a straight path from Rome to Jerusalem for the soldiers to travel and the invaders to trade. And unlike the pedigreed folk who set the stage for this scene, John comes without any credentials. He speaks without the legitimacy of any establishment. Neither the government nor the religious authorities have authorized his program for reform. And John comes, daring to say it's time to change the landscape. It's time to build a new road. But this public works project will lead somewhere other than into the heart of the empire. It's time to create a more level playing field. A time to bring the lowly valley dwellers to higher ground, and a time to bring those living high on the hog down to earth. It's a time to even out the terrain so that all can travel securely together. John's message is short, but not nearly as simple as it appears. He's saying it's time to change direction, that we have to find another way, that violence does not bring peace, swords and guns do not bring freedom, scissors and knives, tear gas and rubber bullets don't lead to peace. But equity and fairness sow the seeds of a nonviolent peace, a peace that is rooted in justice, not victory. So Luke has voices emerge out of that anonymous crowd to ask, well, what should we do? There are some who've come to the desert to hear John who have more than enough to eat, more than enough to wear, And they want to know what they could possibly need to change. They appear to be doing all right. The status quo serves them just fine. And to the comfortable, John's challenge is to create equity. There's some rebalancing to do. To make a new way, to make a new path requires reducing hills and raising plains. How can life be experienced as sacred when some have so much and others have so little? No one needs 2 coats when someone doesn't have one. No one needs more food when someone didn't have any. John's program for reform invites them and us to make peace by creating a new economy between us. Other voices speak from the crowd, and the tax collectors of the day say, well, what can we do? We're caught in this system. We're just cogs in the great wheel of the empire. But according to this desert father, living in peace is possible if we're willing to let go of our endless consumption. When we are willing to refuse to exploit a situation or a market or an opportunity or a relationship or the environment, when we will have a change of direction toward reciprocity and mutuality, when we'll deal in honesty and respect and trust. The tax collectors stand in the story for all of us who are in a position to take advantage. And John's challenge to us and to them was to refuse that path of exploitation. And soldiers speak out of that crowd and say, well, what about us? We're just following orders. Those characters stand in for those of us who always play by the rules, always accept the assumptions we're given, and then dial down our own capacity for critical thought and fail to listen to our own conscience. And to us and them, John says, the road will be straighter and smoother when we stop extorting and exploiting and exercising power over others to better our lot in life. Things will be different when we decide that enough is enough, that we're content with what we have, with what we earn, with who we are. Peace is found in being satisfied, in knowing enough to be enough. I've just returned, as you know, from 2 weeks in Israel and in the Palestinian territory of the West Bank. And it feels for me like I have just revisited first century occupied Palestine. Only in the 21st century, it's the government of Israel, not the Roman Empire, that is occupying the hilltops and building roads straight from those hilltop settlements to Jerusalem and to Tel Aviv. And those who can no longer imagine those with 2 coats ever giving up one, those who can no longer imagine those who have power sharing it, those who can't imagine that the ones who have built walls for their security and safety will begin to understand or consider what is required for the safety and security of those they have imprisoned on the other side of that wall. Those young people, mostly between the ages of 16 and 24, are undertaking suicide missions with kitchen knives and scissors, knowing that they will be shot by soldiers and settlers because they no longer expect peace or freedom. Indeed, as the third generation under occupation, they can no longer even imagine it. And the contemporary soldiers, like the characters in Luke's story, keep following their orders to demolish homes and animal shelters and schools and playgrounds and clinics and even the tents that internationals bring in after a home has been demolished. And they set off tear gas in refugee camps every afternoon. I could time my watch at 3:30 as I stood at Tantur and watched tear gas go off in Ida refugee camp every day in Bethlehem. As a form of collective punishment on a people who have been occupied now for 70 years almost, and who are no longer regarded as human by many of their captors, and are treated without dignity or even common or uncommon compassion. In the midst of a people who have fought and talked for peace for generations, it is hard to find anyone who expects peace in their lifetime. A Palestinian farmer told us, all our people can do now is to work to save what's left. It's no longer about the right to return to villages from which we were displaced in 1948 or 1967. It's no longer about a two-state or a one-state or a no-state solution. All we can do now is to mind what's left, to tend our crops, to plant our fields, to harvest our olives, to plant more olive trees. All we can do is resist the temptation to give in to despair and refuse to seed the future for our children and their children. It was as if he said, all we can do is plant dates. The dates we do not expect to eat. In this season of great expectations, and in a world where many have no expectations, the ancient and contemporary wisdom we've heard this morning tells us there's something we each can do. Change begins somewhere, with someone. John's word was for his people, in their desert, for who they were and where they lived. It wasn't about a revolution. It was about changing the things that were within their power to change. It was about changing their own lifestyle. To do the incremental things we each can do to live more consciously. To consider the costs of our comforts. To live more simply and fairly so that others may live too. to refuse the road that exploits, and to buy and sell in ways that are more just. The wilderness voices are there to tell us that we don't have to wait for our governments and our religions to build us a new road. We are the ones who change the landscape, one lifestyle at a time. So today is a day to ask ourselves, how might we plant dates? In this storied season, we listen for those voices crying in the wilderness. We sing of angels who quiet our fears. We share the company of shepherds and magi who are searching for what's coming to birth in the most unlikely people and places. In the company of courageous parents, we dare to birth the sacredness within us.
In Jesus of Nazareth, as in all great wisdom teachers, we see new ways of being. He was moved by the plight of the poor. He made his home with the homeless and shared his table with those who couldn't command a seat at any table. He dreamed of a world where enemies learned to love one another, where the abundance of creation was shared fairly, and where love was the supreme law.
In the world of the ancient story, near the end of his life, Jesus shared a sacred tradition of his people and reshaped it into something new. Around a simple table, he celebrated with his friends the liberating story of Passover, while he dreamed of another revolution, a world without a Pharaoh or a Caesar, a world governed by the law of love which brought it into being. Together with his friends, Jesus shared the bread of freedom and the cup of compassion.
We're all invited at this table. We're invited to come from loneliness into the welcome of this table.
From anxiety into the peace of this table.
We're invited to come from tensions into the joy of this table.
From the conflicts of the world into the love of community.
Come and share bread to inspire freedom.
And a cup to strengthen our compassion.
As we share symbols as a sign of our intention to work for change in the world, we're invited to come to this table regardless of who we are, regardless if we're a member of this church or any church, but who simply seek, who are hungry, who are thirsty for change, for love, for compassion. We're welcome here.
And on this day, after a week of inexplicable violence, and on a day in which we remember the darkness of the Montreal massacre, and on this day, when our Jewish brothers and sisters begin the great celebration of Hanukkah, the festival of light, we take our light into the world. We take our light to shine in darkness. We take our light, the light of hope, the light in which we plant our dates.